Number 1, where are the White Masks? So we know that the White Masks were the group which caused Rainbow to be reactivated back in 2015 under the supervision of the Global Security Alliance Council and spearheaded by Aurelia Arno. And following the enactment of Article 5 at Bartlett University, Rainbow would continue to pressure the White Masks as the team itself would continue to expand with more funding being given to it. We know that the White Masks would be deemed to be defeated following the end of Aurelia's time as 6, as she would pass the mantle over to Harry Day, and he would use the seized money from the White Mask bank account to recruit Nighthaven. However, if you saw my interview with the narrative director and realization director, they did say that there is a possibility that there are some White Masks still out in the world. And let's be honest, that's a realistic thing. You'd never defeat 100% of a group. What Rainbow did was that they destroyed enough of the White Masks for their infrastructure to collapse, meaning that many of the remaining White Masks probably just went into hiding or joined a different group. So there is potentially hundreds or maybe even thousands of White Masks still out in the world. However, they just simply aren't in a position where they are a global threat like they once were. But with that possibility being something there, the true question then remains is, will we see the White Masks again? And what happened to these remaining White Mask members? Did some of them become carry soldiers? Did some of them even go down a different path? We may see. Based on the popularity of the White Masks, I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like this in the future, maybe even quite near. Number 2, where is Deimos? So at the current moment in the lore with the new era of Rainbow, which I'm gonna dub as Bishop's Rainbow, we are 2 years after the death of Phobos and the dismantlement of his and Deimos' faction of the Keres Legion. Now, we do know currently in the lore that the Keres Legion does operate in factions. We've seen another faction with Nyx being the leader of that one. And although they did defeat Deimos' faction, there is still a massive unanswered question, and that is, where is Deimos and will we see him again? Now, we know kind of where he is, but not fully. We mainly just know that he is in a different cell. He was being temporarily held at Hereford base whilst the GSAC were deciding on where to move him, and that is when the Keres Legion would attack Hereford base and attempt to free him. Now, Rainbow, although having a massive loss during this attack, they would successfully extract Deimos and prevent the Keres Legion from saving him. And an operator who was actually really important for this extraction and taking Deimos to where they went next is Sense, an operator who also has been reselected to be a part of Bishop's Rainbow. Now, Sense has kind of always had a bit of an interesting relationship with Deimos. We knew that when Rainbow infiltrated the lair, Sense actually started to look at some of Deimos's music collection and was like, damn, this Deimos guy is a horrible person, but he's kind of got a good taste in music. Then Sense was one of the key players in extracting Deimos from Hereford during the assault, and when Deimos got moved to the new cell, we know that he said to Sense saying, thanks for the new cell, the last one had a bit of a draft. And I'm not saying that like Sense likes Deimos or Sense is going to free Deimos, for example. It's more so the fact that the writers have been setting up that Sense is playing an important role in monitoring Deimos, and you know, they are an operator who was focused on safeguarding him, keeping him in prison, and you know, of course the two are going to get to know each other if they're spending time together. Doesn't mean that they like them. More so, it's the writer showing that Sense is important to Deimos' story post-capture. But the question does remain, where is Deimos? We know he's been moved, but that's it. In what location is he at? Is he at a GSAC black site? What has happened over these past 2 years as well? Where has he ended up? And will we ever see him again in the narrative? Number 3, Warden as president. So if you don't know the whole Warden as president thing, this actually started from a theory by me, which kind of gained traction and especially, you know, caught a lot of eyes for people who weren't even in the R6 lore scene, just like standard Siege players. But people really seem to like the idea that Warden could become president in R6 lore. Now, I made the argument that it felt like a natural progression of his character. He, you know, served, he was then in the Secret Service and then recruited to Rainbow as well, after President Baldwin would give his commendations for Warden to Harry, because Baldwin did know Harry. Then during the Detroit operation, Warden would be responsible for evacuating the mayor and safeguarding him, and then he would be called to the Oval Office to discuss things with President Baldwin, especially about, how they're going to cover up Rainbow's involvement in this entire operation. So even in Rainbow, Warden had a massive tie to the president still, and all this, diplomatic workings behind the scene. And we also knew that primaries were coming up around this time as well. So with Rainbow being deactivated, I assume that the next natural progression with Warden would probably to go into politics and potentially become president. And many people seem to like the idea of this. Of course, this is something which Jack Ryan did do in this universe. We haven't really seen Jack Ryan in any of the games, but we do know that the universe sort of branched when the Rainbow Six book and game came out at the same time. So that kind of meant anything before that sort of branching of the IP when it comes to Ubisoft's involvement was canon to the universe, because you wouldn't have Rainbow if it wasn't for President Jack Ryan's involvement. So Jack Ryan was in this universe. We just never see him in Ubisoft's thing, but it was groundwork before the Rainbow Six game back in 1998. So same thing, it would have been very similar to Jack Ryan's story, and yeah, many people just like the idea of Warden being president. It'd be pretty cool. But yeah, currently we know that he is back in the Secret Service. That's at least what it currently says in his bio, so we'll see if that progression actually happens. Number 4, what the heck is going on with Nook? Right, so Nook's been having a really cryptic side plot over the past 2-ish years in R6 lore. Actually longer if we go back to where this kind of all started, which was Operation Brutal Swarm, when the Keres Legion, who at this time we didn't know existed, were sort of pitting Nighthaven and Rainbow against each other with the whole QCR weaponry saga. This would result in Nook infiltrating Nighthaven labs, and in retaliation, Grim would hunt her down and find her identity, using it as blackmail. Now, this would lead into a bit of a conflict between the two operators, but Nook would go on indefinite leave from Rainbow, as her identity is something that she values and is also said to pose a risk to national security. So keeping it hidden is in pretty much everyone's best interest, hence why it was such strong blackmail. Now, despite going on leave, we would see her return during the start of the Detroit operation, where she would save Smoke and Sledge from the Keres Legion, and as well as this, we know that she would be on the field in Detroit. However, she would be given a completely different clearance which no other operator had. Now, this could be due to the fact that in her backstory, she would go behind enemy lines and be there for months and then strike when she, could strike and when it was the most valuable. So it's likely that she was able to do that with the Keres Legion as well, planting herself in there and striking only when necessary. But we also know that she would go on to have a briefing with Kavera, the leader of Ghosteyes, so her squad leader, and Zero, Sam Fisher, who isn't the leader but was, is Sam Fisher. Everyone highly respected him, especially Nook, because we know that Maverick saw Nook and wanted to have a catch up with her. However, she went straight to Zero and Cav behind closed doors. They had a conversation and Nook left once again, with Maverick being like, I didn't even get a chance to say hi to her. And now, after this entire time jump with the deactivation and this new version under Bishop, we don't know where Nook is, and as well as this, we heard Bishop talking to Kavera in the Battle Pass saying, wait, Nook wasn't debriefed? Which seems to mean that, she wasn't debriefed when Rainbow was deactivated. She was still doing her thing, and technically, she was never, uncommissioned. Technically, by the sounds of it, she had been still operating even when Rainbow was deactivated for 2 years. So maybe the answer here is that Nook is just that, background stealth character, and that's just the story there. Or will we actually learn what Nook has been up to and why she had these different special treatments, and is there a story that we're actually going to see there? I don't know, but there's been a lot going on with Nook, and they've made an effort to tell that story. Number 5, Rainbow's base. So of course, one of the final nail in the coffin for the 2015 roster and their deactivation was the assault on Hereford base and its destruction. I also realized that we need to find some better terminology for these two versions of Rainbow. I think Bishop's Rainbow works well for the current one, but if you have any better ideas for the one of the previous roster that started in 2015 and was deactivated at the end of Phobos' death, then comment. But yes, we know that Hereford was destroyed, and this was Rainbow's main base, and we did know that they had different training locations around the globe, such as the Tower in South Korea, and this is where many of the recruits would be trained. However, everyone was brought back to Hereford following the attack on the tower itself. So there is a key question here that with Bishop's Rainbow and this new era, where is their base? If Hereford was destroyed, where are they operating from? Because we know that Hereford is where they trained recruits, and we know that Striker and Sentries are back. You know, the Rainbow recruits are still a thing with this new iteration, and they'll find new recruits going forward as well. So where are they actually operating from? Have they rebuilt Hereford? Have they found a new location? Are we going to see Hereford HQ or something like that, you know? We know that OSA's QCR department from Nighthaven is now a separate asset owned by the GSAC. If we could see like a new version of Hereford built using the same technology which Nighthaven used to build Nighthaven Labs, then we could have this entirely new high-tech version of Hereford base to carry us into the future. And maybe that's happened and we haven't seen that yet. Or maybe we're in a different location altogether. But with Rainbow back under Bishop's leadership, they need a base. Somewhere needs a base. Heck, the SAS need a base. Although Rainbow were operating from Hereford, that is still the SAS. So like, although Rainbow suffered a loss there, so did the British Special Forces. They also lost their base as well. I think a lot of people forget that. So I think that they would have rebuilt it in some shape or form, because you know, that was like not just a hit to Rainbow, that was actually a hit to my country as well. But yeah, jokes aside, where are they operating from? Do we have a new Hereford? Are we going to see this anytime soon? Because they need a base somewhere. And considering we know they have recruits, they have strikers and sentries, they need to be getting trained at some place. Heck, could they be back at the stadium, for example, and using that for, well, its training purposes? And finally, number 6, Nyx, Eidolon, and the bioweapon. Now, all of this being unanswered makes sense since this is the current narrative we are following, so we're obviously going to learn more as time progresses, but Nyx is the leader of the faction of the Keres Legion we see Bishop actually face off against in the cinematic. Eidolon was the attempted killer of Zero and would be running an underground auction at Calypso Casino, where Zero would also find a bioweapon. And although Sam and Solid Snake's mission was a self-contained season, a bottle episode as described by Alex K, there is still, you know, connections to the universe here. It's not like it's not in the universe and not canon. And as time went on and more we learned about that story, actually kind of seems that Nyx and the Keres Legion did have somewhat of a link here. Not saying that Eidolon worked for them, but they did clearly, you know, cross paths, and especially with this bioweapon as well. Is this more involved with the Keres Legion? We know that Bishop has brought Legion and Lion back to Rainbow to be Seaburn experts for the team because of this bioweapon threat, which Bishop is afraid of. So although Eidolon is dead, he did have his hand to play in here, but what has Nyx got to do with all of this? Are we going to see more about her? We did see her get captured by Bishop in the cinematic, and is this bioweapon from another faction of the Keres Legion, for example? There's a lot of overlapping and crossing here, and as the conspiracy continues to broaden, we'll learn more. But yeah, this is kind of our main focus of the plot at the time of upload, and we're just going to have to wait and see where it goes from here. So although there is many more unanswered questions, I thought I should just limit it down to 6 for this video. If you want to see when these questions get answered, make sure you hit that sub button and drop a like on this video, comment any other questions you have, and let me know if you want me to make another one like this. Have an incredible rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one, and stay safe.